fascination, not to mention ridicule. For years, Gaddafi has displayed eccentricities that baffled many. His entourage is made up exclusively of female bodyguards. His views of the world, religion and power are summed up in his so-called Green Book, a must-read for all Libyans. During his visit to Italy in 2010, aimed at cementing ties between Rome and Tripoli, he even tried to convert supermodels to Islam by handing out Qurans. Ronald Reagan nicknamed him the Mad Dog of the Middle East. Some say he is more of a jester of the court than the leader of a nation. Zainab Walji, Inside Story.
Well, joining us now, our guests from Paris, Nouri al-Masmari, former head of Gaddafi's protocol. Mr. al-Masmari resigned 2 days ago from his post. He was a member of Gaddafi's closest circle. In fact, here you can see him walking with Gaddafi in Italy earlier. And from London, Mohammed al-Abdallah, the Deputy Secretary General of the National Front for Salvation of Libya. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. Mr. al-Masmari, if I could start with you, you would have watched and listened to that speech by Muammar al-Gaddafi. What did you think? What's going on in his mind at this moment in time?
Well, to be honest, what other force he has got? After using mercenaries, tanks, bombing by the Air Force, is there any other more forces to be used? What kind of forces there is still hidden? We've been using all sorts of forces being used against the innocent Libyan people. Just they were marching to ask for their human rights, not more nor less.
Did you expect him to respond in this way?
Well, he already did it. I mean, he been bombing Tripoli by Air Force, and the testimony of that, the witness of that two Mirage from the Libyan Air Force, they went to Malta asking for political asylum. On top of that, he was sending two warships to Benghazi, and they turned it around and went to Malta for political asylum too. I mean, there is no more other force to be used unless he is going to use another weapon, which is unknown. It's another thing.
Is that why you resigned?
Of course, I did not resign for this reason. I resigned for the mass genocide killing of my people. It is a blindly shooting. I mean, they are just what do you want? A mercenary doesn't know Libya. He knows only the money. He paid these mercenaries with the Libyan money to kill the Libyans, innocent. One woman, she came out of the balcony asking her son to come inside and not stay outside. She been shot on the spot and killed, and she fell down from the second floor. She was doing a march, or she just was calling her son. Imagine to what level. They are blind, they don't care.
But
who is die, who doesn't stay, or who doesn't...
Mr. al-Masmari, before that, for almost 40 years, you were at Muammar Gaddafi's side. Did you do anything during those 4 decades that you regret now?
I haven't. Thanks God I was performing my duty as a state chief of protocol, and the state chief of protocol did not do anything against his people. I mean, I am a diplomat, and first of all, I resigned for 15 years. I mean, within this 40 years, I left for 15 years, and I had to return back. I was called to return back, and I came back. But I never done anything that makes me regret for that. Otherwise, I would not resign. I will be with him to protect myself, as the other people. He said there are people with him now in his side, but they are not defending him. They are defending themselves. Because if he will fall down, they will be judged for what they have done. They will be judged for all things that they regret now they are doing it. So that's why they are defending him. They are not defending him, but they are defending themselves.
Mohammed al-Abdallah, do you agree with that? There's a lot of self-preservation that's going on at this delicate time.
That's exactly what we're seeing. The ones who remain around him, including his sons, understand that it's a matter of survival right now. Gaddafi's disappearance and his regime's disappearance means the disappearance for them, the disappearance of the life as they know it, and as Mr. Masmari mentioned, they will face prosecution for what they've done, and some of them are just as brutal and just as guilty as Muammar al-Gaddafi himself. Muammar al-Gaddafi, gradually as he took power, he used force and he used brutality in the 70s against the students, where he publicly hung students who were marching, demonstrating, demanding rights in Benghazi and in Tripoli and in many other squares. He executed his opposition members abroad in the 80s, including here in London, in other places in Europe and in Arab Middle East countries. He executed probably the most brutal massacre that we saw, 1,200 prisoners in the Abu Slim prison who were unarmed. They were prisoners. They were in jail already. He executed them within a less than a 3-hour period. So these kind of brutalities is not a surprise to us as Libyans. However, nobody could expect that he would have this kind of a reaction to the uprising that happened in Libya. People were marching on the streets demanding their constitution, to have a constitution, to have their own democracy, to have their voices heard, to have a better life, a country that is earning billions and billions of dollars of oil revenue, where they don't even see anything reflected in their lives from that, their children being killed, their mothers being widowed, etc. This is what the people were asking for, and they were immediately met with live bullets, missiles, RPG, rocket-propelled grenades, things that you use in war, what two armies used against each other. In this case, security forces, were using it against unarmed civilians. This is unimaginable. This is something that you only see in movies.
Mr. Abdullah, usually, looking back at the speech again, and usually when leaders threaten their people, it's quite often veiled. They say something along the lines of, "You will bear the consequences of your actions." This seemed to be far more explicit and overt. How dangerous and ominous is that, in your opinion?
It's very dangerous because, like you mentioned, normally it's hidden within other messages. In this case, the message was clear from day one of the uprising, but at the same time, I think Gaddafi's speech and the way he was reacting, even his body language, his heavy breathing, even his clothes was ripped. If you noticed, he was not in a normal place that he typically gives his speeches at. All of this is a reflection of a regime that's basically being toppled. There's very few people who remain around him. The first person that came up to meet him and hug him was one of his kids, Saadi al-Gaddafi. I think his inner circle right now is very small. Thus, he had to bring in even more mercenaries to try to execute his objectives of toppling this uprising.
Both of you have mentioned the mercenaries. The mercenaries are not a new concept when it comes to Libya. These mercenaries have been used for decades by Muammar al-Gaddafi. Mr. al-Masmari, tell us about the dynamic between Muammar Gaddafi and